What makes a man like Faisal Shahzad drive a would-be car bomb into Times Square on a crowded Saturday evening, hoping to maim and kill innocent people? It is one of the biggest questions of our time in this post-9/11 world. Ask 100 people and you'll get 100 different answers. We've gathered what we think are among the smartest three you could get. Fawaz Gerges is Professor of Middle Eastern Politics at the London School of Economics. Bernard-Henri Lévy is perhaps France's most important public philosopher. He's the author of the book Who Killed Daniel Pearl? And Irshad Manji is a Muslim determined to reform her faith. She is the director of the Moral Courage Project at NYU. Bernard, when you watched this Times Square bombing and you learned that this man came from Pakistan originally and then went back and seems to have gotten radicalized, did it remind you of your journey in Pakistan tracking the killers of Daniel Pearl?
Oh, of course. And on many respects, many regards. First of all, the camp where he seems to have gone in order to be trained, I know it well, I know it a little, the camp of Kohat near Peshawar, which is one of the Taliban Al-Qaeda ruled camps where Omar Sheikh, the kidnapper of Daniel Pearl, the Wall Street Journal journalist beheaded, was also trained. So it's the same place. And the two characters, the two men, are very similar. This mystery, this enigma of well-bred, learned, perfectly assimilated, real good citizens, becoming all of a sudden these mass killers, it is the same story. Omar Sheikh, which I studied very carefully. I spent month and month in the brain. I tried to spend a few months in the brain of Omar Sheikh. It was the same story. He was coming from London School of Economics. I'm sorry. No, of course. He was a real product of British education, as the Faisal is a product of American dream, and something happens in the libido, in the brain, this has to be clarified, which suddenly makes the twist and put them to that.
Now I have to ask you, because you used one word there that struck me, in the libido.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You think something happened in Faisal Shahzad's libido?
I don't know, but in the case of Omar Sheikh, it was clear. In the case of Omar Sheikh, there was one dimension which was clearly determinant, which was relationship to women, relationship to the supposed impurity or purity and so on of femininity, womanhood, a sort of fear, hatred and fascination toward that. So Faisal is too early, of course, nobody knows, but something very big must happen in order to produce that, of course.
Well, what's your answer to because the puzzle, I think Bernard puts exactly right, which is these are assimilated immigrants. They seem to be successful, at least by any conventional metric, and then some small crisis happens, and in external terms, it doesn't seem a big, he loses his apartment, his house, or something like that, and he becomes, and it drives him to terrorism.
Ultimately, Fareed, I do think that what we're seeing right now is what I would call the globalization of grievance, thanks in part to the freedoms of the internet and the fact that online jihadis are using and abusing these freedoms to preach what I would call a false narrative. And the narrative, I think, is something that Faisal Shahzad actually fell into. The false narrative is that the West hates Islam. After all, goes the argument, look at how indiscriminately America, Israel, and their allies are slaughtering Muslims. But the reality is that more Muslims are being tortured and murdered at the hands of fellow Muslims than any foreign power.
So why does the narrative take hold if it's false?
Because, first of all, it's simple. Secondly, because it feeds into existing suspicions and conspiracy theories. The New York Times this week has reported that many members of Faisal Shahzad's old village in Pakistan have just decided that his arrest is simply an American conspiracy, a plot to to justify the war in Afghanistan. And so these are easy and lazy narratives. And what I would suggest to you is that moderate Muslims around the world have not been aggressive enough in pushing back against this narrative for one reason, and that is that moderate Muslims are so caught up in their own defensiveness about what they consider to be Western colonization that they have been distracted from the imperialists within Islam.
But one thing is clear, Farid, is that Afghanistan, Pakistan has emerged as a critical theater for the new militancy. In fact, the Pakistan-Afghanistan theater now is the main source of radicalization. He was not the only one, and he will not be the other one. The nature of the conflict has shifted as American war aims have changed dramatically in the last few years. Now the United States is not just waging a war against the few remnants of Al-Qaeda. The United States is waging all-out war against the Taliban in Afghanistan and the Pakistani Taliban. President Barack Obama has ordered more drone attacks against the Pakistani Taliban than President Bush in his entire full presidential terms. And as you well know, the drone attacks often cause civilian death. And as a result, Pakistan and Taliban nationalism is fueled anti-American sentiment. We have many cases of young Muslims in Afghanistan and Pakistan who also, some who live in the West, who have been radicalized by a perception, as you said, that the West, particularly the United States, is waging a war against their culture.
Are we, Bernard, in danger of overreacting here? This is one guy. He does not seem part of a particularly clever plot. I mean, the attack failed. It was pretty amateurish. What does it tell us?
I don't know if you are in danger of overreacting, but what is possible is that this is the target of those who sponsored the attempt of terror. It might be the intention of the Taliban, and they might have the idea that this failed amateurish